it causes you to reflect on your values and your, growing up and your lessons you learned, advice you got that you really, really took and were appreciative of, mistakes you made, failures, what you would do differently, a chance to express regrets that you might have, and just moments of joy and what really meant the most to you in life. And those are all things that we have found family members and people, loved ones, want to hear, and they want to pass on to their next generations.
Welcome to Business with Purpose. I'm your host, Molly Stillman of Still Being Molly, and this show is all about bringing you the stories behind the brands, companies, and small businesses that are changing the world. Each week, I get to sit down with an entrepreneur, a CEO, a nonprofit director, church or community leader, or just an incredible person who is trying to make a positive impact, not only through their personal life, but also with their career. My goal is to show you that no matter what you do for a living, you can make an impact wherever you are. My guest this week is Heather Maio-Smith. She is an award-winning interactive storytelling pioneer and technology visionary who brings over a decade of immersive storytelling leadership to her brand new company, StoryFile. StoryFile is incredible. We dig into all of the details of it, but basically what it is a storytelling app where you feel like you're sitting across from your grandmother or somebody important in your life and listening to them tell their stories. This is such an incredible conversation. You're going to love it so much. But before I get to my conversation with Heather, I want to thank our partner of the show, and that is Mama Suds. Mama Suds helps label-reading moms create a safe and non-toxic home for their family by creating synthetic-free household cleaners. And one of those cleaners is Mama Suds Fine Linen Soap, which is the best thing since sliced bread. You can wash your high-quality sheets, linens, delicates, and organic fabrics with a fine linen soap to keep them looking newer and softer longer. Use 3 to 4 capfuls for a high-efficiency machine on a delicate cycle, or 4 to 6 capfuls for regular machines on a delicate cycle. You can head on over to mamasuds.com and use the code MOLLY for 15% off your order. Now on to my conversation with Heather. Heather, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you. How are you today?
I'm doing good. A little tired because it's so early in the morning over here in LA, but I'm good.
Well, I'm so looking forward to this because when I first came across the work that you're doing with StoryFile and just the idea behind this is something that, I have a 77-year-old dad and, I don't have any living grandparents. And this is something that I would have loved. And, I think about this is something that I would love to do for my children and things like that. So we're going to dive right in, and I want you to give me the Heather 101. So tell us who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I kind of fell into it. I became a sort of an experiential or immersive environment exhibition designer. And I happened to be getting a lot of commissions from the Holocaust field and quickly became somewhat of an expert in intergenerational testimony. And I was having these great conversations with these older people, and even from my background, I was super close to my grandparents. So I sat there and I said, my kids and my grandkids are never going to have the opportunity to have the conversations or learn the things that I was learning from these individuals. So we wanted to somewhat replicate the Q&A that happens after a lecture. So after these Holocaust survivors would go into public spaces and they would tell a little bit about their story, the Q&A was the part where the audience really started to deeply connect with that individual and really engage. So we said, all right, what would it look like if we replicated that experience? That was 2010. And that led me on an 8-year journey until I got to the point where we decided that we could do this same thing the same concept for everyone on the planet. Yeah. So we wanted everyone to be able to tell their story this way so that future generations could actually talk to them and have a conversation instead of, just watching a 5-minute home video or seeing photos on a page in an album, or, scrolling through your computer and not knowing who half the people are. So it gives you a chance, if people tell their stories this way, and it's simply answering questions. It's videoing yourself answering a lot of questions about your life. If people do this, then their future generations will actually get to know them. They'll be able to see them. They'll be able to hear their real voice. They'll get the stories in their own words as they wanted them to be told. So yeah, that it kind of, as in life, I guess, one thing leads to another and you get to another place and then you start to another place and there you are.
Yeah. What did you go to school for? Was entrepreneurship kind of always in your blood, or where did this kind of entrepreneurial spirit come from?
I grew up in a family-owned business. Yeah, I had worked for my mom and her family-owned business since I was 9.
Oh,
so
wow.
The dinner table was, all about the stores and this and that. I went to school actually for history. So I was just always fascinated by the 20th century and everything that had happened in it. Yeah. And I had kind of expected to teach, but kind of ended up in this role.
Well, it's interesting that you had this entrepreneurial spirit, but then you went to school for history. Like, I feel like I totally see the connections because your love and fascination with history and things of the past and stories and all those things like that fits so seamlessly into what you do. And so for people that have not heard of StoryFile, how does it work? Can you break it down for us and like how you kind of took this seed of an idea and saying, okay, people really want to connect and people want to hear these stories from, from the person, from the horse's mouth, I guess is the phrase. I'm always really bad at remembering what those phrases are. But yeah, like they want to hear those stories. So tell us how you got from that seed of an idea to what it is today and how it works.
That was not an easy journey, I'll tell you.
As all entrepreneurs, I don't think I've ever heard an entrepreneur who's like, you know what, my business was really quite easy.
It wasn't easy. I think it wasn't difficult in the classic sense.
Yeah.
But it was difficult because we were doing something that had never been done before. And we didn't actually know if it would work when we started. So once we started testing and getting it out there in the world, then people were coming up to me and saying, can I do this for myself? Can I do this with my family? And at the time, the infrastructure for technology wasn't really there, because if we were going to do it for everyone and if we were going to make it ubiquitous for the entire world, it couldn't cost $500,000. It had to cost $500 or $250 or $50. It had to be something that was easy enough for everybody to be able to do, meaning they had to use their computers for their videos. They had to be able to use their phones to record anything, any device, recording device that we are now used to, they had to be able to use.
Right.
So what we did was we built a system that was completely online and completely automated. So you record yourself answering a bunch of questions about your life. You can choose any questions you want. There's 1,600 questions in the database. You just go through it and you end up talking about your whole life from beginning to end. Actually, we've been told several times, it's an amazing process for the interviewee, for the person that's doing it to go through, because you don't often think about your whole life in one go and it's in its entirety, or things that you haven't thought about in, 40, 60, 80, 20 years. It causes you to reflect on your values and your, growing up and your lessons you learned, advice you got that you really, really took and were appreciative of, mistakes you made, failures, what you would do differently, a chance to express regrets that you might have, and just moments of joy and what really meant the most to you in life. And those are all things that we have found family members and people, loved ones, want to to hear, and they want to pass on to their next generations and get to, the ability to, if my kids could have the ability to talk to my grandfather, who I was so close to growing up, that would be amazing. I would love that.
Yeah.
Because then they would understand me. And then they in turn would understand themselves maybe a little more, because we all are made up of everyone that's lived before us.
Yeah.
And so if you understand those people and you get to meet them, it makes our identity that much richer.
That's a really great perspective to really think about our ancestry and those that have come before us and how those things make up who we are. And, I've had this conversation, actually. It's so funny how I kind of keep coming back to this same topic, but in different ways. Actually, the guy I had on the podcast last week, who's airing right before you, his name's Daniel Grothe. He wrote this book called The Power of Place, Choosing Stability in a Rootless World, Rootless Age. But it was one of the things we talked about was when you look at generations past and how they just stayed in the same area for a really long time, and how you have around the world, you have these pockets of centenarians. So people who live over 100, and National Geographic did a study on the blue zone and these areas where these people are living, 105, 110, 115 years old. And what plays into that? Why are there so many people in these areas that live to be over 100? And there's a variety of factors, but one of the factors was just like familial community, friendships, all those kinds of things, and the richness of relationships, and how these communities have just passed down these stories and these traditions and all this kind of stuff, and how they literally benefited from it in their physical health. And so I think about how fascinated I am about ancestry. I mean, I did my ancestry DNA during the COVID, and so tracing our ancestors, and and I think part of it is, my husband knew his grandmother and his great grandmother and his great great grandmother. My kids met their great great grandmother until she passed away at almost 103. Meanwhile, I grew up and didn't really have grandparents. My grandparents died when I was very young, and I didn't really have a relationship with my grandparents. So I didn't have that. And so I long for that. And I want to, have all these answers to questions I didn't get. And anyway, all that to say is that it really does show so much of who we are and how we are as people when we can dig into our past and dig into our families and see oh, wow, there was a generation of entrepreneurs before me and I didn't even know that, or all those kinds of things. So as you were developing this and as you were starting to kind of get it out into the marketplace and test it out and have focus groups and things like that, was there something that was surprising to you that you were discovering in those early development stages?
Well, it's not necessarily something we didn't inherently know in the beginning, but everyone, similar to what you just said, you have questions. So you didn't know your grandparents. And as you got older, as you had kids, maybe, as you got married, as you were relocating or moving or, talking to your husband's family and interacting with his grandparents, you had more questions and more questions. It's those types of questions that we want you to be able to ask those individuals.
Yeah.
Even if they're not here, there's no reason nowadays that you can't have that conversation.
Yeah.
So what we need to get people to do is to think about themselves in this sort of time capsule way, in that at some point in your life, you need to do a story file for a future generation that you may have never even met. And just take the time to do that, because what we found is people don't necessarily think their story is interesting. So they don't necessarily want to do it. But you have to step back and you have to say, were my parents' stories interesting? Did I appreciate, are there questions I have for them now that I didn't ask them then, when I had the chance? You have to step back and say, there are things that you would want to know now from your past generations that you don't have the opportunity to know. Now, future generations will have the opportunity to know because you will have answered those questions for them and they can talk to you and have those conversations. So it's a matter of almost your children going to your husband's parents and saying, this is important. We want you to do this, or you going to them and saying, this is important. Would you do this? People think it's kind of their initial impression, which which came out in a lot of the testing was, I think that people think it's a bit egotistical to do, or, there's another word I'm trying to think of, but
narcissistic.
Narcissistic. But it's not.
No, I don't think so at all.
Exactly the opposite of narcissism, and just allowing whomever. When you did your DNA, did you find out a lot of things that you hadn't known?
I found out that I knew I was Irish. I didn't realize how Irish I am. Like, it is like, I was like, maybe there will be something really interesting that it's like, oh, part of my DNA is from like Asia or something. Nope. Ireland and Scotland. It was like 70% Ireland and a little bit Scotland, but then like 2% Norway. And I was like, okay. Didn't know I have a connection to Norway.
But that makes total sense when you think of the Nordic, that whole influence that it had in that area.
Yeah. So I was like, well, that's really interesting, but I mean, it's funny because nobody in my family has ever mentioned any connection there. So I'm like, well, what's the connection? And it spurred these other questions. And, but we learned, like, on the flip side, we learned with my husband's family, because we did my husband's ancestry. We were able to trace his ancestry back on both sides, his mom's side and his dad's side, it obviously wasn't called North Carolina at the time, but to the area that is North Carolina into like the late 1500s. Like, it was like 400 years of his family being in North Carolina. And we were like, what? Like, that is crazy. And so that was just so interesting to me that his family came here 400 years ago and like to the area that his grandmother lived until she died. Like, they just came to that area and just stayed. And that was just really fascinating to me. Whereas, my ancestors were coming to the United States in like the late 1800s, early 1900s. So it wasn't, it was much more recent. So it was just a really fascinating thing. But yeah, you're right. I had all these questions, and I want to just kind of double down on what you said about how, like, this is not narcissistic or whatever what the other word was, egotistical at all. It's a gift. It is such a gift. And, I think about, my mom passed away when I was a senior in high school. And there are so many things about her life that I have so many questions about that I will never get the answer to. And I think about like what I would give to be able to hear her voice, see her talk, hear her tell a story from her perspective. I mean, I have some cassette tapes, I have some VHS tapes, but I mean, a lot of them don't even work when I try to play them because, the tape is so old.
That's exactly what it's all about.
Yeah.
It actually, you lose the sound of their voice the first,
100%.
first. That's the first thing. That's the first kind of memory to go. You can see their faces for much longer, or the images, but the stories you remember the most.
Yeah.
That's exactly why, we want people to do what we want anyone to tell their story in any way they can. This is just one option, but it's the reason that we like this particular option is because of the video element.
Yeah.
In that it's one thing to write down your story or, write an autobiography or do an audio recording of yourself. You miss the nonverbal communication. So when you see a video of someone, you understand a lot more about them and their personality, their essence, like who they really were comes through. And the human eye is really discerning. We can tell if someone's lying, for example, or, they're kind of, it's an iffy situation.
Yeah.
And so it really does tell you a lot about a person, video. So that was the difficult part about making it automated. It was all about the video component that we felt really strongly we needed to find an answer for how to do this in an automated time. I mean, you can go on the website at storyfile.com/life or StoryFile Life, and you record all of these questions, all of your questions, and in real time, you can go back. Let's say you did a couple hours of recording. Right after that is finished, you can go back and invite anybody, email anybody and invite them to interact with your story file, and they will be able to do it within, minutes of you recording it. So it's all just right there in the moment. You don't have to wait 3 months for a book to come. You don't have to wait even 2 weeks for a photo album to arrive anymore.
Yeah.
And we wanted these people to be able to share it with whomever they want to. You can keep it totally private. I have one client who's actually putting it in their will.
Oh, wow.
They don't want some of those stories. At future iterations of this, right now, you either have to make it public or you make it private. But future iterations, you'll be able to do that on a question by question basis. So let's say you thought of something or you ended up telling a story that you don't particularly want anyone to really know now. You can keep that question private. So there'll be different levels, what you want to put out there in the public. Maybe you're a public figure and you want part of your story out there in the public, but you want to reserve another part of it for your family. That's also possible. So there are there are also a lot of different applications for it as well. But this is our first consumer product.
I am so encouraged by entrepreneurs who are so innovative but they see it in something that is like, this is something that is unique, it's innovative, and it solves this deep felt need. And in this, using and kind of redeeming this technology that we have, but in a way that connects us, that is more personal, is more intimate. And, and it's something
you can get to know anyone. I mean, you can literally really get to know a lot of people from all different parts of the world if you wanted to, if they made it public, for example.
Yeah.
But going back to your connection and the people being rooted in certain areas and your husband's grandmother and living there for 400 years, think of all the stories that she had, or her mother had, and life in that area and what has happened. We'll have the same trajectory. Our grandkids and our great grandchildren will be living in a completely different world than our world is now, but they should still understand what we're living through right now and what we've lived through our whole lives.
Yeah.
Because it helps everybody to understand and connect. And if you can make a real connection with people, it's all about making those connections and feeling a part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah. I think it reminds me of, as I shared, I didn't really have grandparents growing up, but when I was in college, it started off as I had to do some community service just as a part of a program I was in. But I ended up continuing just on my own. I volunteered at a nursing home that was right down the road from my university. And I think I had to do like 15 hours of community service for some program. And so but then I continued and I ended up volunteering there for the next, to basically all of my college career. And I loved it so much because all I would do, my whole job was just to go in there and just sit and listen and talk with these sweet, seasoned folks, but I loved the conversations because so often the wisdom that these incredible people who have lived these incredible lives can impart is just, you can learn so much. And we get into this mindset, and just to be totally transparent, like thinking about all that we've gone through in the last, 18 months with COVID and political, distrust and division and all these kinds of things. And we can get into this mindset of being like, oh, life is horrible for us. And we live in this terrible world and everything's going to explode and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, have you ever sat with somebody who lived through the Dust Bowl in the Depression, and had, food ration cards? Like, that was not that long ago, and they turned out just fine. Like, we're gonna be all right, guys. Like, you had, so it's like it gives you a sense of perspective.
Right.
It's not to diminish what we're experiencing right now, but the reality is every generation has gone through really difficult things and really difficult times, but it's what you learn from that then you can impart to the next generation that then will go through their hard crap. And so, but it really, you learn so much just by listening to people's stories.
I think you hit it on the head. It's perspective.
Yes.
Right. And understanding that these things do happen, that they're, we're not the only people on the planet that have ever gone through situations like this. It does, it may be difficult. It may be truly, truly difficult for a lot of people. And some people will never recover. Yeah. But it is also something that you do have to look at with a bit of perspective. Yeah. And it helps so much in life not to feel as if you're the victim, and that why is this happening to me? Yeah. It's not happening to you. You may have made bad choices along the way. Who knows? You may have made great choices, and still something bad could happen. So it's just knowing that it's part of being alive. Yeah, that's part of life. And these people have so many great stories, so many things to make our lives richer. And yeah, you're right. It's a gift.
It is a gift. It is a gift. Yeah. And I love that you use the phrase like making our lives richer. And I almost think of it as like, if you've ever seen like a really beautifully made quilt and, and just the different pieces that all look so different, but when they're together in this just incredibly intricately designed and stitched quilt, right, that it makes this beautiful almost piece of artwork that then you can wrap yourself up, while you watch a movie by the fireplace. It's very lovely and dreamy. But yeah, so I mean, I think this is just incredible, and I love what you've done with this for people that are sitting here and they're like, I know the person that I want, to answer questions, or I want to do this for my kids or grandkids. How can they best do that? Walk us through that?
Just StoryFile.com or StoryFile.com/life. And you go onto the website, you pick how many questions you want to do. You can start picking out all the individual questions, or you could just do them by topic. So you can just click all, or, click a few, and then go through that whole thing and then start recording. That's it.
That's so awesome. And like you said, there's future iterations coming down the line with, the ability to kind of pick and choose what you want to be public and private. And I love that people are leaving it in their will. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. Well, Heather, this has been so much fun. I'm going to make sure for the listeners that we have all those details in the show notes. But before we go, this is where I get to ask just some fun get to know you questions. Okay. So Heather, are you ready for the get to know you round?
I am ready.
All right, let's do it. So question number 1 is what will go down in history as the best concert you ever attended?
Oh, Madonna.
Oh,
Madonna. And I happened to see her in a really small venue. I grew up in San Diego, and it was an amphitheater, a smallish amphitheater. And I think it must have been 82, 83, somewhere in there. I don't know, when she had just started.
That's
really
awesome.
And that was really cool.
That is really cool. I mean, to be like, I saw Madonna, no big deal. Before she was like, Madonna.
Yeah, it was during that whole I don't know if you want me to tell the the name of the song. But when she used to wear all the jewelry.
Oh, yeah.
Punk 80s.
I mean,
yeah.
I love how a lot of fashions and things are kind of rotating their way back. And I'm like,
they always do.
They always do. But I'm also
a little bit, maybe a little bit of a twist.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'll be interested to see if like that 80s hairband, thick blue eyeshadow and like lightning bolt earrings, like, is that coming back? I just don't know. We'll see. I love it.
I think you'd be surprised if you walk down Melrose here in Hollywood.
That is true.
How prevalent that is.
That is true. Yeah. On my farm in North Carolina, I don't think I'm seeing a lot of blue eyeshadow and 80s hairbands, but it is.
You never know.
You never know. I am not, and the listeners know this very much. I am not a TikTok person. It's just not, I'm not hanging on TikTok, but I have an account. Just because I have one friend who like told me about this section of TikTok that's really fascinating. And it's this girl who just posts these produced TikToks of Chinese street fashion. And so and it is fascinating. And it is like really, I'm like, these people are killing it wearing, I mean, like stuff
Japanese as well.
Yeah. And I'm like, I mean, I could never wear that, but y'all are like eons ahead of us in your fashion. I also got really into like, there's another section of TikTok that's like vintage people who like only wear vintage stuff. And so like they dress like it's like 1953 and that's just like what they wear. And I love it so much. I'm like, I have so much like respect and like
that's a lot of creativity.
Yes.
And a lot of patience actually to do, because you don't come across that easily.
No.
You have to really work at it.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
And they like look amazing. Cool. And, but she's like, yeah, when people ask her, like, is that really what you wear? She's like, yeah, this is what I wear every day. This is what she wears to the grocery store, to like parties and stuff. She dresses into her entire wardrobe is all vintage from like the 40s, 50s, 60s. And it is fascinating. And I just think it's amazing. I love creative people like that. Anyway, Madonna got us to fashion anyway. Question number 2 is, what is the most interesting thing that you have read or watched recently?
Oh, wow.
Could be like a book, a news article, a documentary, anything, or movie, anything like that.
I'm having a complete blank.
That's okay.
My husband and I watch a lot of documentaries, but as I said before, I'm kind of a history buff, 20th century. And I started my career out, I got to a place where it was really all about the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And so my husband actually is the executive director of a Holocaust Institute, the Shoah Foundation at USC. So we actually watch a ton of really interesting stuff, but I'm blanking right now. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think, I tend to go in, especially with like what I'm reading or watching. I'm a book fiend, as evidenced by the bookshelf behind me. But I went through a season last year where I was like consuming Holocaust, World War II, like all of the books in that era. It wasn't really even on purpose, because it was like I would finish one and then my library app would be like, you should also read this book. And I was like, okay.
No, but they're fascinating. I mean, you want to talk about lessons learned?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. If you've ever get a chance to read The Choice by Edith Eger, I mean, talk about an amazing woman. Yeah. I pretty much love autobiographies and anything about people. Obviously.
Me too.
It's my whole world.
Yeah. When I taught, when I was a high school teacher, I always used Elie Wiesel's book, Night.
Right.
And that was one that I have students who I taught, however many years ago, 13 years ago, 14 years ago, who will message me and say, to this day, like that book changed my life, or that book has stayed with me for all these years. And so, yeah, I love to share those stories with people. I think they're important for us. Okay. If someone were to play you in a movie about your life, who would you want it to be?
Jennifer Aniston.
Okay. I was literally about to say, you kind of remind me of Jennifer Aniston. I kid you not. I should have said it even before you said something to be like, I promise I'm not making this up. Your hair is very like Jennifer Aniston.
Slightly darker hair. I don't know what it is. I've been in stores. I mean, even just a Target, I'll be buying something and someone will come up to me and just like say, has anyone ever told you that you remind me of
Jennifer Aniston? 100%. I totally get it.
I'm shocked. I think it's maybe what they call an affect, maybe, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I totally see that. And I think it is hilarious that I was just about to say that. All right. And then my last question, this is the question I ask all my guests. And that is, Heather, what does it mean to you to run a business with purpose?
Oh, it means the world to me to be able to do this. I have the best job in the world. I mean, I get to wake up and literally do something for a living that is going to change people's lives in the future. I just had one client who called me yesterday who did a StoryFile with her mother's sister. And yesterday was her funeral. And she just called me up and she's just, thank God that we did it. So it's truly, it's a remarkable thing when you turn on that computer or you look on your phone and, or you see it on your TV and you're interacting and even if you just say hello to a person who's passed and who has passed away.
Yeah.
That's a remarkable gift to give them, to have them be able to share with people what was really important, or even thank people or tell them that they love them and say things to them that those people have probably never heard them say before.
Yeah. Heather, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing just your vision and your dream and giving this gift to the world that, hopefully will impact generation after generation after generation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody needs to do it.
Yes.
For that to happen. Then it will truly affect all of our generations.
Yes. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly. It was so nice meeting you.
Friend, I would love to know what you loved about this episode or something that you learned. Find me on social media. I'm at Still Being Molly or at Business with Purpose Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And don't forget to use that hashtag Business with Purpose Podcast when you're sharing the show with a friend. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. If you are a first-time listener of the show, welcome. Be sure to check out the archives for past shows featuring so many incredible entrepreneurs, business owners, community leaders who are changing the world. If you are a regular listener of the show, thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for tuning in and week out. Be sure to head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Radio Public, Overcast, Stitcher, basically wherever you get your podcasts. Click that subscribe or follow button. To click that button means you will never miss a new episode of the show. And while you're there, would you take a moment to just leave a review? Would you take a moment to maybe share one of your favorite episodes with a friend? Leaving a review, sharing the show with a friend. It is totally free for you, and it is the biggest help for me in the entire world. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. It just also helps me to know what you're liking and how the show is impacting you. As always, this show is produced by the incredible team at Third Wheel Media. Thank you so much for listening. Now go do something good with purpose, on purpose.